Welcome everyone to this edition of Growing Up in Science, the global series. Today we have a very special guest, Yael Niv, who is my co-organizer in this series, and we've collaborated on a great number of events that I think have been quite meaningful. So I can't wait to hear Yael's own story from the abstracts, from the unofficial story. It just seems like a very unique and fascinating and at times very harrowing story. So I'd love to hear more about that. And I thank you for all joining us. We're trying a regular meeting instead of a webinar format, hoping that you're all willing to open your cameras and we can feel that we're actually in a room together. Other than that, the only thing that I'm doing today is introducing our moderator, Veronica Caraffini, postdoc in Cambridge, and she will be taking it from here. Vera, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. It's really nice to see such a full room, but of course I was expecting that, and I'm also really looking forward to today's story. Just a bit of technicalities before. So first of all, it's really a pleasure to see all of your faces. So please feel free to turn on the camera. It feels a bit more like an in-person event. Of course, Yael will tell her story, and after that, we are open for questions from the audience. You can, of course, type your question in the chat, and then I will read it out. Or since we are all here and looking at each other, you can also raise your hand, and then I will call your name. You can ask your question if you prefer. A bit of introduction for our speaker today, then I will leave everything to her. Yael received her MA in psychobiology from Tel Aviv University and her PhD in computational neuroscience from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And she spent a major part of her thesis at UCL. She's currently a professor at Princeton University at the psychology department and the Princeton Neuroscience Institute. Besides this, she started NeuroTeam, a very active support forum for faculty. She developed and is currently teaching a course on mentorship for future faculty. She has been a strong advocate for grade-free teaching. She's the co-founder of Bias Watch Neuro. And last but not least, she's a co-organizer of the Growing Up in Science global events. And after reading her story, I'm really looking forward to today's event. So I think it's now your time, Yael.
Thank you for that introduction. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I have to say, I've given many, many talks over my career so far, and this is one of the ones that has been most stressful for me to think about, even though I don't need to know anything or prepare anything. Just the amount of time I stressed over that unofficial bio was kind of ridiculous. And after writing that, I kind of feel like maybe I don't need to say any more in some sense, and but I'll take you through my story. And I've been thinking about also, thank you for those who turned on their cameras. It is really, I've never given a Growing Up in Science talk, but I've been a moderator of ones that we used to have in person, where it was like a very small room and no faculty were allowed, and it felt like what was said in the room stays in the room. And this, I've been going even back and forth. Weichi and Vero will tell you that, should we record, should we not record? It feels very strange. But anyway, so growing up in science, so I don't feel like I really grew up in science. I think I grew up alongside science, and science kind of happened to be the career that I ended up in. So, so I'm Israeli. I grew up in Israel, and both my parents have a PhD, but they're not in academia. So when I was in second grade, we moved to the US. My dad was doing his postdoc. So my dad's a physicist. I was born in Rehovot, which is a town where the Weizmann Institute is, because my dad was a PhD student. So that's where my parents moved to. And then he finished his PhD and went to do a postdoc at Rutgers University in New Jersey, and took his family with him. Me and my sister and my parents. It was a very big adventure. Those were the days, like this was like, you know, a million years ago. No internet, no email. People would send cassettes because they wanted, you know, the phone calls cost so much that my grandparents and my aunt would send us cassettes with like just talking to us, and we'd send them back. And we lived in a small rental apartment and stuff. And my sister and I just thought this was fantastic, but like all our furniture was from garage sales because my dad was living on a postdoc salary and my mom wasn't allowed to, her visa did not allow her to work. So she did a master's. She was a social worker in Israel. She had a BA in social work. So she continued to do a master's degree, and then she finished that, and my dad was still continuing with his postdoc. So she just, you know, what the heck, started doing a PhD as well. So she ended up with a PhD. She finished it in Israel because after 4 years, my dad wanted to go back to Israel the whole time. He had said 2 years max. He started a faculty position here. I hear now, he tells me now, as a kid, I was not aware of any of this stuff. But then was recruited to an industry company, Indigo, in Israel. And so we went back to Israel. And my dad was, you know, never went back to academia after that. And my mom finished her PhD and also continued with her social work job. So in my mind, PhDs were a degree that you get a BA, master's, and PhD. Those are the maximum degrees that you get, but it had nothing to do with an academic career. So that was growing up. I was a very shy kid. I think those of you who know me now might find that hard to believe, but I think maybe moving countries and stuff had something to do with that, because I didn't really have a lot of friends. I was always kind of on the outskirts of you know, the groups in class and stuff. I was kind of on the margins. And that was until I was in 11th grade. So in 11th grade, I became a guide in the Scouts in Israel. So the Scouts are not like, if you are American and you know Girl Scouts, it's very different. The Scouts in Israel, which I think is an international, it's like everywhere except the US possibly, is very different. It's non-denominational and runs, kids run the whole thing. So I was a guide to fifth grade girls, and I was really stressed because I was a very shy kid, and I was like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to be in charge of these kids? And my friends told me, you'll just do it because you have to. All my friends had been guides the year before, and I wasn't deemed worthy to be a guide. So like only two kids my age did not get to be guides, me and another kid. So like huge failure at that age. It seemed like a huge thing. And then the year later, finally I deserved to be a guide. So everybody already had the experience and they could tell me, you'll do it, you'll be able to do it. And I was so scared. And I remember that very first meeting where I said, you know, we said, okay, all the girls from this and this class and this school go with Yael. And it seemed like everybody got up. There were 40 of them that first meeting. And I think that really changed my life. That from then on, I was very different. It was such it's like, I thought of this as I was preparing for this. And I think I really kind of let loose strengths that I had and didn't know, of organizing people and leading people and kind of having a vision. Even if it's just for the Scouts, it's like, you know, an hour and a half. What am I going to do with these kids for an hour and a half? But I had a vision, I had an idea of what I wanted it to be like, and I would do it. And it was really amazing. And these girls thought I was amazing. So it like built my self-confidence. I changed all my friends in school. I realized that my friends in school were not supportive and were just keeping me down and making me feel bad. So one day I just decided I'm not going to talk to them anymore. And I don't care if I don't have friends. Like I just got all these strange strengths to completely change my life. And so I think kind of everything I am today is because I guided those girls in the Scouts. So that was high school, all of that. And then I went to the Army. In Israel, everybody has to go to the Army for women for 2 years, men for 3 years. I went to the Army. I was accepted to this special course that is quite long, and because they they train us for 7 months basically, and some more than in the unit. They want us to sign up for more time to start with, because it's not worth training someone for 7 months who will leave after, less than a year and a half later. So I had to sign up for 2 extra years before I even started. And before they could, it's in the intelligence force. So they were like, we can't tell you anything. It's going to be really hard, really tough, but here, sign the dotted line. And we weren't even 18. So it's like our parents have to sign for us. And I signed like everybody else, two extra years. And then I went to this course, and it was pretty terrible. I hated it. I mean, I learned a lot. And it wasn't like, nothing physical or anything like that. It was, I learned to program for the first time. I had not programmed before. I actually really didn't I wasn't very good at programming. So for a while, whatever, I won't get into that. But it was just, the course was really individualistic. So they had this attitude that I now realize is a good attitude of like, we don't throw out anybody here. You can all succeed. It's up to us to teach you the material. But one, because it's intelligence and everything is secret, you can't talk about anything that you do in class outside of class at all. And 2, you have to do all your work by yourself, because we want to know exactly what you don't know, because it's on us to teach you. But if we don't know what you don't know, then we can't teach you. So it just made people like super individualistic and kind of like not talking to, I don't know, it's just the social atmosphere was horrible. And I hated it. Hated it. I hated it so much that I was sick most of the time. I'm usually not a sick person. Back and forth to doctors. One illness would end and a new one would start, just like really suffering through. It was mostly men and 6 women. And I remember at the very end of the course, I said to one of my girlfriends there, I said, I can't believe we finished this. And she said something that's really stuck with me today. She said, oh no, Yael, we just didn't have the courage to leave. And it was like, oh my God, you're so right. Because I hated it so much. By the end, I had such a hard time. Why didn't I leave? There was nothing to prevent me from leaving. Except that they said that, they don't throw out anybody. It's like 1 and 2 courses that doesn't make it to the end. And it's a special, it feels like, the more they tell you this is challenging and hard, and it's going to be really, really hard, but you can do it. You have to do it because you can, and not because you want to. And so I think about that a lot, about, am I doing things because I want to do them, or just because they're hard, just because they're a challenge, just because I want to prove to myself or to someone else that I can do this? That is not a reason. And since then, I've left a lot of things that, from like a movie that I don't enjoy to other things, but just like, I'm not staying here just because I started. That's not a good enough reason. So that's what I learned from that course. Plus I learned how to program. And then I went to the unit that I was going to serve in. And I also didn't like it there. I now know that I didn't like the people. Then I thought I didn't like programming. There was some culture of bullying in that unit when I just arrived. I was never like directly bullied, except like, they were like, we ordered pizza, you're going to have pizza with pineapple. I learned out that I like pineapple on pizza, but that was not my choice. But I remember kind of being afraid of these people, these guys. There were like 3 guys in the unit that were bullies. And I remember them leaving because, their time was over in the unit, and a few new people were going to come. And I kind of went around and told people, let's pretend this is a really nice unit. Let's I was basically telling them, I'm going to teach today in my mentoring class about creating group norms. I had this idea that if we pretend that this is a really nice group, new people always kind of adopt the norms of the place that they come to, so we can kind of make a big shift, because some people have left and people are coming. And it worked. We did become a nicer place. So I was really impressed myself by that shift. But still, I did not like the work. It was mostly working with computers and not working with people that I now realize is what I didn't like about it. And at some point they asked me, they basically, even though we all signed 2 years extra, they don't have enough like FTEs for all of us. So they asked me, would you want to leave early? And I said, yeah, either I go out to teach in the course, I'd be happy to be a teacher, but if not, I'm happy to leave. So they were like, okay, so you're leaving in 2 months. And I remember kind of going out of that meeting, it was such a surprise. It was like, it was 1.5 years before I was supposed to leave that I left. And I was like, I was sitting outside with my boyfriend and crying. And I was like, I don't know if I'm crying because I'm happy or because I'm sad or because I'm surprised. It's just like, whoa. But anyway, I left, never looked back, left the Army, and I thought I'm never going to program again in my life. I hate that. And I went to guide hikes in the Society for Preservation of Nature in Israel. That had been a dream for a long time. Also, I applied to be a full-time job in that. And they were like, if you don't have a master's or at least a BA, I can't remember, that there's nothing, don't, come back after you have a degree. But I found some part-time jobs, somewhere basically being a secretary at a unit that like does little like hikes for kids, and then started teaching. Like it was very part-time job, but I loved it. But it also paid less than a very part-time job. So as a side job, I decided to go do a programming job, like a software engineer job for 6 months to make some money, to save some money. Because those were really, the market for that was really strong at that point. And I went to work at a place. So in the Army, I was doing like really interesting algorithms and stuff. Went to work in a place where my software programming was like databases, the most uninteresting kind of programming possible in some sense. And I loved it. And it turned out that it's not about the content at all for me. It's about the people that I worked with. I had good friends there. I really liked the people in my unit. And I stayed there 7 years. Every year, at the end of the year, they would ask me at the end of year meeting, or kind of like I forget what they're called. They would ask me, what are your plans? How long are you thinking of staying? And I would be like, I signed up a sight unseen for 2 years in the Army. I never do that again. Like as long as I'm interested, I'm here. If I don't find it interesting, I'm out the door, which I'm sure is not what they wanted to hear. But that was like, it's on you to keep me interested. Otherwise, I'm not going to stay. But I did stay for a long time. And in that time, I also went to university. So now starts the academic career. So I didn't know what I wanted to study. I had, because I had lived in the US in elementary school, I continued to read books in English. And so kind of the college experience that I thought of was a college experience in the US, like a liberal arts college. You study all kinds of stuff and then kind of decide what you want to major in. That's not how it works in Israel. In Israel, apparently, I didn't know, I was so clueless. And I think this is the same in all of Europe. You kind of decide on your degree from the start. You enroll in a specific degree. My dad was a physicist, so I thought, and I took physics and economics, kind of APs, or like higher level at high school. So I thought I'll study physics. But I looked at the like booklet about how to sign up to university, and they said, and I was expecting that, I'll find out if physics is what I want to do, but no, you have to say from the start what you want to do. And there are no optional courses. There was only 1 out of 4 or 2 out of 4 that you can choose in the last year. Everything else was predefined. And I just looked, it was almost like, threw the book across the room. I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't know what I want to do. And I remember some really good advice also from my dad about this. Well, first of all, earlier in high school, when I decided to do economics and not chemistry, everybody did physics, chemistry. I hated chemistry. So sorry, anybody who does chemistry. so I was like, oh, is it okay if I do sociology and economics? They went together. And I was really worried that I wouldn't be able to get into university to what I wanted. I wouldn't have high enough grades or whatever. I wouldn't have what was needed. And my dad said this thing that I also remember and say to myself and to others in many occasions. He said, you know, doors don't really close. If later you'll need chemistry, you can pick up chemistry, you could do extra courses, you could take the exam, right? You could do some summer studying on your own. If you don't want to do it now, do now what you want to do now. And if you need the other thing in the future, you can always make it up. So he said that. And the other thing he said is physics. Are you really interested in physics? And I was like, maybe not so. So basically, I didn't want to go to the university because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wasn't sure I wanted to do physics. I kind of was sure I didn't want to do physics anymore. I was thinking environmental science. What was it going to be? It was going to be environmental science and something else, but the maximum you could do is 2 courses. It just was not for me. So I didn't enroll that year. I only went to someone from the Army had told me, so the Army was good for one thing, connections and people who know stuff. So someone had told me that there's this interdisciplinary program at Tel Aviv University where you can study whatever you want. I was like, great, that's for me. And you also don't have to apply to the university. You could just apply straight to the program. If you don't get in, you don't waste kind of the application fee. And if you do get in, then they get you in the back door. So I went and interviewed for that. I applied for that and I had an initial interview. And in the initial interview, they asked me, what do you want to study? And I said, oh, I want to study so many things. I'm interested in so much stuff. And on the spot, the guy was like, look, normally we don't tell you on the spot, but I'm going to tell you right now, you're not accepted. That's not what we look for. We don't look for people who don't know what they want to study. We're looking for people who know what they want to study, and that thing is an interdisciplinary thing. And this is not saying that you're not smart enough, blah, 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 your grades are great, but just, this is not it. Try again next year. And I remember leaving that room and thinking, try again next year. Never going to try this again, just got a rejection to my face in the middle of the interview. But then that year, as I was guiding hikes and working in industry, I also read the book Gödel, Escher, Bach. Someone else in the Army gave me that one and said, it's a really great book about everything. And I realized what I wanted to study. I realized that I'm really, really, really interested in the brain. And that's the most fascinating thing. I'd never thought about the brain before. And so I did apply to that program again the next year. And this time I was accepted. And so I studied in that program and it was great. It was, it really was what I wanted. I could take whatever courses I wanted, and I was clueless enough to take courses in totally the wrong order, to take what's the equivalent of 400 level classes in my very first semester and kind of be sitting there. And I remember writing the paper. We had to write them in pairs. And I wrote with this woman. She probably thought, where did this girl come from? Because she was like, I wrote a draft, and she said, well, you have to put citations. And I said, what do you mean? She said, who said this? And I'm like, what do you mean, who said this? I said this. I was just like totally clueless about what I was doing. But I walked through lots of buildings because I was in all these, I took courses all over the place. I found, I took lots of elevators, and they had ads for seminar series and ads for conferences. So I started going to all kinds of seminar series and really kind of getting into the research side of university more than the course side, because it was just kind of available to me. And I went to a conference on memory, and it just blew me away. All of this like in my first year. So through these seminars, basically, I heard a talk by Tuvik Becker, and I remember sitting in his talk and just being blown away by his research he was doing. He was evolving artificial neural networks that were doing cool things. And so I went to his advisor and I asked him, what courses do I need to take to do that stuff? because that's really interesting. And he gave me a list of courses, and I didn't see him again for like a couple of years, and I just took all those courses one by one, statistics courses and Markov chains. And I started in psychology. I was really interested in memory, but psychology was good questions, but not good methods for me. Like I didn't feel rigorous enough, or it wasn't the methods I was looking for. I didn't feel like I could answer questions that way. So I took all these classes with math and not in math, actually in physics. I was told that if you take a math course, take it in physics, not in math, because in math, they will teach you to prove it, and in physics, they'll teach you to use it. And I just needed the tool. I didn't need, I believe someone else proved it. I believe that it's correct. So yeah, I took all these courses, and then I went back to that same person. So this program, this interdisciplinary program, is because you're not doing any specific BA according to like by the book, you basically don't get a BA. At the end of it, you have to apply to a department for their master's program and convince them yourself, like, talk to them and convince them that what you have as your background is good enough for the courses that you have are good enough for a master's for that department. They might say, you need to take 2-3 more mandatory courses, but basically you go straight to a master's. So I went back to this advisor and I said, his name was Eitan Rupin. And I said, well, I took all these courses. Will you accept me as a master's student in your lab? And I think he basically had no choice. So he said yes. And then and now the question was, what department will I be in? So he was in medicine and computer science. His office was in computer science. His whole lab was stashed away in a whole other building in pharmacology. Nobody was doing pharmacology there. Everybody was doing computer science. We had our servers were standing over, there was a board over the sink where because it was a lab, so there was a sink and things like that, but there was a board and all this servers standing on the sink. And so I went and asked, I thought, I would be much more marketable in the future with a computer science degree. But on the other hand, I was really still interested in psychology. And I had another advisor from my program who was going to be my advisor in my master's together with Eitan, Daphne Joel, and she was in psychobiology. So I asked psychology what I need to do for a master's there. And they said, you only have to do this one extra course, research methods. And I asked computer science, and they said you have to do 7 more courses. That would be a whole year. And so I just took the easier path and I went with psychology. And I knew I made the right decision when I went back to Eitan Rupin and I said, okay, I've decided to do psychology after a lot of deliberation. Now that that's what I've decided, are there any of these 7 courses that I should actually take for my research in your lab? And he said, no. So anyway, I did that research. Mostly nights and weekends because I was working almost full-time job in my other job. And in this time, gosh, I see that half an hour have passed and I'm looking at my notes and I'm only in my master's. So I'll just say a few specific things from that. So people in my lab had been to a summer course, or one person had been to a summer course in Telluride, the neuromorphic engineering course, and she told me about it. And it sounded really fun. She came back all excited. So I applied for that too. I remember asking her, what do you learn there? And she said, mostly volleyball. I was like, okay, sounds good. Actually, I don't play volleyball. I'm afraid of balls. That's my reaction when a ball is coming to me. But I went to this course and it was also really life-changing for me because I was going to get married at that time. I had a boyfriend for many years, long story, from high school, kind of in hindsight, not the greatest relationship, someone who was constantly telling me that I'm not good enough, but I didn't, challenges. If I'm not good enough, I'll make myself better, or, you know, I will change this interaction, this relationship, and make it good. So I kind of was in that relationship, I think, for the challenge in some sense, without knowing it. And when I was in this summer course, I realized that before leaving, I didn't really want to go. It was like 2 months before, well, 3 months before my wedding. And I had this big project at work also that was going into production. And I hate packing, hate. That's a time when I'm willing to cancel any trip. So I was saying to my boyfriend, I really don't want to go. And he was like, don't go, stay with me. But I went because, you know, I was going to go. And the first few days, I really hated it because I didn't know anybody, and my roommate spoke only Italian, and it was just, it was hard. And I called him and I said, I hate it here. And he said, well, come back home. And I thought, okay, I'll give it a week, because it's a 4-week course or 3-week course. I'll give it a week. If by the end of the week I hate it, you know me, I don't stay in something that I hate. If by the end of the week I hate it, nobody's keeping me here. But by the end of the week, I loved it. And then I realized that I didn't want to tell my boyfriend that when I called him, I would just tell him the bad things. And I wouldn't tell him the good things. And it was a really bad sign for me, because suddenly I realized that other successes that I had, even when I got accepted to this course, like he was behind he was doing his BA because he had done longer army service, because he's a guy, and that's how it is in Israel, etc. And he constantly felt inferior to me. I was making more money than him because I had the software engineering job and he didn't. And I didn't feel that he was inferior, but I couldn't convince him of that. And I realized that this is going to be somebody that, like, if I don't want to live with somebody that I don't want to tell him about my successes, that I don't want to tell him when I'm enjoying things. I only want to tell him when I hate it. So I basically went back home and broke up a month before our wedding, and had my parents call all the guests and say it's off and stuff. It was really, I'm telling it like this, it was very, very painful, but definitely the right thing to do for me. And I think, you know, having a supportive partner is super, super, super important. So that was that. And I'm going to skip a lot of things, but one more thing that I want to say about my master's. So at some point, so I thought a lot about whether to say this or not, and it wasn't in my, you know what? Wait, can we stop the recording for this? Is that okay?
Yes, I paused it.
Okay, let me just say a couple more things and be done. So you saw in my unofficial bio that I had another partner who I was planning to marry, and he died unexpectedly, and that was a huge thing. And all these things are kind of like, you know, my whole story, my growing up in science story is not a science story. It's like all the other stuff that happened to me while I was in science. It's my, you know, ending up at age 30, looking at myself and saying, hey, I'm divorced, widowed, like, you know, all these things have already happened to me. But I was still at age 30, I was a graduate student. So I went to do my PhD. I left my industry job because they wanted to promote me. I needed to be full-time there. And I realized that PhD is full-time. You don't do it nights and weekends like I did my master's degree. So I decided to first do a PhD and then go back to industry, because that seemed like the better order. The other way around didn't seem, you know, first going to industry and then doing a PhD. Nah, people don't do that. So what was I saying? I totally lost my train of thought. Anyway, so I went to London. I did my PhD there. I still had 2 advisors. I had actually 3 advisors at that point. And I met Nathaniel, who is my husband now. Today is our anniversary, actually, 14 years, which is a ridiculously long time. It's our 2nd anniversary because we got married twice, once in the US, once in Israel. So we have 2 dates to celebrate, and we forget both of them. Luckily, my in-laws remind us. And I guess one thing to say from all of this is, I remember, so Nathaniel is American, and we now live in the US, and I'm a very Israeli person. I really would love to live in my home country. I remember thinking then about, oh yeah, I know what I was saying, that at age 30, I was a PhD student. I was older than all the postdocs in my lab, because in England, they're all like babies when they go to grad school. I was older than everybody. It was fine. I'm even older than Nathaniel, and he was a postdoc when we met, and I was a grad student. So yeah, this idea that, so he is incredibly supportive of me and of everything that I do, and I do a lot of stuff, which is quite amazing because his mom was a stay-at-home mom. So like he has, like, if you'd think, what is he used to from home? It's not this, but he never expected me for a second to not work, to not do the stuff that I do, to not do my 2nd job and 3rd job, because I'm the kind of person that does more than one thing at a time. But you know, we have to live in the US and things like that. And I remember, and people ask me in Israel, like, oh, is this what you want? And blah, blah, blah. And I remember also even just the fact that he's not Jewish. I'm not religious at all, but my grandparents are all Holocaust survivors. And I remember I felt really bad going to my grandmother to tell her, I mean, her whole family perished in the Holocaust, to tell her that I'm going to marry someone who's not Jewish. And she was amazing. She said to me, if he's the right person for you, that's all that matters. And, you know, when you find someone that is the right person for you, it's always a package deal. It comes with some things that, you know, it comes with maybe living in a country that you don't want to live in, and etc. But it's really, I think, you know, we don't get that. That's what I've learned along the way. We don't get all of our choices. We don't get, you know, I didn't get to live with Jörg because he died, and I didn't get, you know, you get the choices that you get, and whatever you can't choose, don't waste too much time about it on it. That's how I live, basically. So I try to not think too much about the things that I can't control. And that's it. I'll just leave, you know, all the rest, getting the faculty position and tenure track and all of that. I'll leave it just to questions, because I've been talking for way too long.
Thank you so much. It was really amazing. For me, you could go on also another hour. It wouldn't be a problem. Apart from the fact that you say that you like pineapple on pizza, so I'm not super happy about that. But okay.
I didn't have a choice with that, and I learned that it's actually quite yummy.
Okay, it's okay. Okay. Let's not go into these details. So I want to start with a question, if I can, and then I leave it to other people. I didn't see any question in the chat, so if you want to post some or just raise your hand then. I have a question for you that comes from something that you said at the beginning, that you had this failure while in the Scouts, and I would like to know, how do you deal with failure? And like, even now that you're a professor and many years after the Scouts, probably many experiences, and maybe what are your advices on that?
That's a really good question. So I think I'm quite lucky that one of the things that my parents did really well for me is they somehow brought me up to not be competitive. I'm competitive with myself, but I think I'm not. I mean, maybe part of it is just I have really bad memory and arbitrary things. Like I could never remember what grade I got or what grade other people got. Like after exams, everybody would be comparing and I would be like, I don't remember anymore what grade I got. So I think that's helped me to not see these failures as a comparison to other people, which I think makes them hurt even more. So I think I can kind of compartmentalize better. But you know, like everybody else, I feel crappy. And then maybe again, it's the fact that I have such bad memory. I forget about it after a while. I just don't think about it all that much. Yeah. I think in academia, we have so many failures, so many grants. So I, as junior faculty, I wrote probably 20 grant applications and did not get them, one after the other. Some of them resubmissions and stuff, so it's not like each one was a new idea. I didn't have that many ideas, but even to the point that some of them were group applications where the application was funded except my part. It was like, it was almost a joke. I said to people, you should collaborate with me. You'll get the money and you won't even have to pay me anything. You know, we'll write a grant. This happened twice. I was like, what is going on here? But I don't put my self-worth on these things. And especially, maybe it helps that my academic story is kind of a side story, because I didn't say I also studied shiatsu, and I'm now I studied CBT, and I have like all these other careers that I could have had if this one didn't work. So at no point in time did I feel like my whole future depends on being an academic, or even getting tenure in academia. It was always like, you know, if this doesn't work, then this is not where I want to be, in the sense that I want to do things the way I want to do them. And I, a lot of times, especially in tenure track, I thought, you know, people do things very differently from me. I invest a lot of time in my team and think a lot about my lab, and maybe less about research than others. And I'm not motivated to, like, you know, have to get a Nobel Prize. Like, I'm not in it for that. I'm in it for the enjoying, like, working with people and seeing them grow. And so many people are not like that. So maybe I'm the wrong person, the wrong job. And like, okay, so they'll tell me that, right? They'll fire me and I'll know that this isn't the job for me. So yeah. One more thing to say about that. When I was thinking, finally, after like the end of my PhD, I realized people go to do a postdoc and then they stay in academia. And I'd been like so clueless about this. I also thought that once you get a job, you never have to apply for money again. I remember applying for this $500 travel grant and thinking, this is almost the last time I ever have to apply for money. I was just completely clueless. So what was I going to say? Shoot, I forgot the train of thought. It was not about, oh, right. I remember thinking, this is awful to say with all these academics around. Looking at academics, some of them are really not people's people, let's say it that way. And I remember wondering, is that self-selection or is that acquired? Like, if I go to that career, will I become like that? Because I don't want to. And then my thought was, well, even if I don't become like that, do I want to hang out with a lot of people who are like that? I was very kind of open-eyed about it. Decided to do it anyway. But that's, I think, part of why I'm so adamant about doing things the way I want to do them, because I kind of don't want to become someone else.
Thank you so much. And we have a lot of questions in the chat, so I will try to go through them. So one asks, I would love to hear about raising children as a neuroscientist, challenges, and what you've been able to do or not to.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, so here's another, you know, you don't get to choose everything in life. So well, I wanted to have my first kid at age 27. I didn't because my partner died. And then I didn't later, things took their time. But then when I did want to have children, it just didn't work for a while. So my first baby is an IVF baby and took 2 years, a little bit less to conceive. And I was very stressed about that. And because a long time before that, some doctor had said to me, probably incorrectly, that I might be undergoing early menopause. So just to add some stress on things. So I was really worried. And one thing that I wanted to share, just in case people, I would have made that same exact mistake, except now I won't. As I was trying my darned hardest to get pregnant, people would come in unsolicited, give me advice on how I could have a family and a career, and that will not hurt my career, and I shouldn't be so career focused and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, F you. Like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Everybody around me getting pregnant and I'm not managing to. And people are like telling me that I'm too career focused. So don't do that either. You never know what's behind the scenes with people and what they're going through. And then when I got pregnant, I remember someone, so I was tenure track at that point. I remember someone talking to me on the train. I used to commute from, we lived in New York, and because Nathaniel was at NYU and I worked at Princeton. Someone coming to, a student coming to sit next to me and saying, I have a personal question for you. I see that, you're pregnant now. Do you think that the best time to have a baby is when you're tenure track? And like, if I were drinking coffee, I would have spit it out. It was like, you're kidding me. You think you can choose this? No. And two, this is just what happened. So a lot of people would ask me, what are you going to do once you have the baby? And I was like, what do you mean? What am I going to do? Like, have a baby and, have maternity leave and go back to work. Like, doesn't everybody do that? So in Israel, everybody does that. All my friends in Israel have kids. Nobody's a stay-at-home mom. All my friends' parents, nobody was a stay-at-home mom. Like, this was my model. In the US, people are like, wait, you're having a kid. Big life decision here. Are you going to continue with a career? So it was very clear to me that obviously I'm going to continue with my career. It was even better in a sense that I had the 2-hour commute, because that meant that Nathaniel was basically mom. He was the one that was close to, he would drop the baby off at daycare. He would pick the baby up. Someone had to go in the middle of the day. I mean, he was like 4 blocks from our daycare and I was 2 hours from our daycare. So I think that was really helpful to set us up for more equal caregiving. Also other small things, like even though I was nursing, we had 1 bottle a night that he would give the baby, even though everybody says, the baby will get confused, blah, 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 nipple confusion. Doesn't happen. What happens is I could sleep and he could feed the baby. So we had very, very equal caregiving to the extent that we can. And I think that was really helpful. Yeah, so, and the other thing is I had a good role model, because my advisor, Dafi Yael, she had 3 babies in tenure track. And she moved close to the university, or maybe she already lived close to the university. And after her maternity leave ended, her nanny would bring her baby in to nurse whenever, like every few hours. So I remember going to Daffy's home when she was on maternity leave. She would have meetings with us, not weekly or something like that, but if there was something like once in a while. So I went to her home to have meetings. I remember sitting in her office and her baby arrives and she's like, okay, we have to stop the meeting now. So I did the same. When my maternity leave ended, we moved to Princeton for a semester. Nathaniel had a sabbatical semester. So we moved there and we split the time. I took care of the baby a day and a half a week. Nathaniel took care of the baby a day and a half a week, because our nanny could only do 2 days a week. Bad mistake. Find a nanny that can do more time if you can. But when I wasn't taking care of the baby, he would be brought into the office to breastfeed. And I remember at some point, and this is unusual in America, someone asked me, are people okay with that? And I was like, they haven't said to my face otherwise. I didn't ask for permission here. And hopefully it would be some, an example for some women here. Like I had this example from Daffy that it is possible. And like, for me, this is how you do it. So that's how I did it.
Thank you. Another question asked if you could talk a bit about how you dealt with the two-body problem.
Yeah. Well, we were really lucky. So it started with Nathaniel looking for a faculty position and I looked for a postdoc. So postdoc is easier to look for. Still, we started looking separately. We were like, we each do our thing. But then in the narrowing down phase, we obviously wanted to be in proximity to each other. So I had an offer at NYU and one at Princeton, and I decided to go to Princeton, and Nathaniel he also had job offers at both, and he decided first to take a job at NYU. And partly I did have the thought that it's better for us to be in different universities because we do similar research. We had been in the same lab. We had dated secretly all those years because we were in the same lab. We only told our advisor once we got engaged. He probably guessed before, but I think he appreciated not being told. He's British, like these, you don't talk about these things. So I thought being in different universities is better. We can each kind of make have our own turf, our own name. It's a 2-hour commute each direction, which I think I remember people asking me, oh my God, how are you going to do that? And I was like, it's doable. It's a 2-hour commute. It's not like a different state. I went to this, at SFN, they used to have this program, maybe they still have it, where women students and postdocs can talk to a woman faculty mentor, just like a one-off meeting. And I'd gone to this, I'd sought a lot of mentoring experiences wherever they were possible. I went to do this. And I went to this, and this woman told us this. Basically, she was like, oh, you can do it. It was us because it was me and a postdoc, and she told us both her story. And it was like a positive story. You can do this, but it sounded like a horror story. She basically, long story short, she lived in a different state from her husband because her husband wouldn't leave New York and she was in Arizona. So she lived in Arizona for 7 years, all of her tenure track, raising her daughter on her own. He would come for 1 week a month or something like that. I was like, leave that guy. But anyway, she didn't leave the guy. He eventually moved to Arizona. But I just thought, I can do this back and forth in one day. That's not the end of the world. And it's temporary. It's just for my postdoc. Lo and behold, it turned out not. And that was the other side of the two-body problem, that I was just like, I'm not going to worry about this until we have to. But then after a few months at Princeton, a couple of months, I was like, wow, I really love it here. And actually, it is doable from New York. It would solve all of our two-body problems if I were faculty here. But now I'm screwed because Princeton doesn't hire its own postdocs. And I'm a postdoc here, what a mistake. I should have gone to be a postdoc at NYU and kept this as my option for faculty. And then I was like absolutely incredibly lucky, some constellation of events that totally, just happened to happen then. There was a job opening at the wrong time of the year. So basically opened a job in March or April. So I think it was March, some ridiculously late. Maybe it was opened in February, but basically they tried to hire someone who was on the job market and had gotten an offer from somewhere else. And so they opened a job for this person. And then that person said no, because they had an exploding offer from another university and Princeton couldn't get its act together fast enough. So now they were stuck with this open position. They were like, well, okay, so now we're going to interview more people. And I remember my advisor, John Cohen, my postdoc advisor, who like one day in the beginning of lab meeting, he said to me, Yael, after lab meeting, can you come talk to me? And I was thinking, oh shoot, he's gonna tell me that I'm always late and it's so disruptive because I am always late for everything. And that, you know, I really have to be on time. And so I went to his office kind of like afraid I was being admonished for something. And I was going to be admonished. And he said, well, look, we have this faculty position open. I think you should try to apply, but only if you're mature enough to realize if you don't get it, it's just because it's too early and blah, 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 not because we hate you or, you know, and, you know, if this is going to ruin your postdoc, if you won't get it and it'll ruin your postdoc, then don't apply. And I was like, of course I'm going to apply. I mean, I couldn't promise that it wouldn't ruin my postdoc and that I would take it maturely, but obviously I have to try this. And so I applied, and I think at that time of year, they had very few applications. They interviewed only 2 people, me and another guy. I got to see his interview because I was in the department, and my interview was second. And I got the job, and it was just like amazing because I hadn't even submitted my PhD yet. I got an offer letter that said that this is contingent on you submitting your PhD thesis because I had started my postdoc before submitting my thesis. So that's how we solved the 2-body problem. And it was really just a huge stroke of luck. And since then, many of you know, we've hired Nathaniel away back to Princeton. In fact, the job that I got was the job that they had offered him. It was the same FTE that hadn't been filled that he had said no to. So I got his job. But here again, I think in terms of women in science and how we are sometimes overshadowed by other people, especially, you know, someone who does similar research and is a few years ahead. I think it was really good for me and for my career that we were in different universities. He only came to Princeton after I got tenure, basically. So I kind of got to be my own person, and only once I heard John Cohen give a talk where he totally attributed my research to Nathaniel and Nathaniel's research to me. At least he crossed it over. So he attributed research to both of us, but just not the right one. So in the beginning, we were confusable, but later they figured out who is who.
Very interesting. Another question is, I really appreciated what you said about consciously shaping group dynamics. And could you talk a bit about shaping your own lab environment as a PI?
Yeah, well, that is what I'm teaching today at 3 p.m. Today, our class is on cultivating group culture. So it's really funny because in thinking about that class and in thinking about this growing up in science, I kept getting confused about which goes where. I don't have a lot of, you know, here's how to do it, but I think it's important to be intentional about it and to think about it. And group norms are really powerful. Like what I said about that group in the Army, I think I'm a big believer that people adapt themselves to the place that they come to. So it was really important for me in the beginning to set the right tone in my lab. But even then, it didn't, like, you don't always get to choose everything, right? So it didn't work exactly as I wanted to and as I wanted it to. And definitely my lab has changed a lot over the years. In the beginning, it was me and all the guys, like everybody in my lab was a guy. And then at some point it was almost the exact opposite. We were like, oh, we should hire some guys because, you know, the one guy who's left with all these women will feel, you know, minoritized. The lab has really changed. I think I don't really control the group culture, or at least in the beginning, I wasn't even part of it because I was commuting, right? So I never spent time in the evenings or in weekend, like never spent out of work time with the lab. And even then I would only go in 3 or 4 days a week. So it was always like meeting, barely have time to water my plants at the end of the week and go home. Like it was just, I wasn't part of the social scene, but I think the place where I think a lot about my group is a bunch of individuals that have a life, that other things happen to them while they're sciencing, and a lot of things have happened to people in the lab, and I try to be really attentive to that, and to always prioritize. Like I've multiple times said to people, you know, life comes first. Like this happens, an illness in the family, a death in the family, whatever, like drop everything. This science that we're doing, not life or death, not, you know. And also one thing that I learned when I went to that first summer course, so if you remember, I said that when I went to that summer course, there was a project that was going into production in my job. And I remember I left everybody with like very clear instructions on what to do, because this was our big project and it was going into production 2 days after I arrived. So like they had to get everything prepared. I got back, they had done nothing had moved. And so I learned that you can let things go. One, the world will not fall, and two, nothing will happen while you're away. So it will all wait for you. So if you need to take time off, just take time off. Your project will be there just fine when you come back. And so I think that's what I contribute to the culture in my lab. And then we go on retreats once a year and things like that, just a day of doing something else, hiking, not anything big. But just remembering that it's a bunch of people and not a bunch of people doing work, and not a bunch of scientists, a bunch of people.
That's really great, and it's important to remember. And someone else is also asking why you didn't get back to industry after the PhD.
Yeah, only because I live in America, I think. Because I don't have that option here. That was like, I feel like if I lived in Israel, I had so many options there, so many things and networks that I already have. But especially in Israel, we get 4 weeks off a year, and here in some jobs you get like 1 week off or 2 or something ridiculous like that, which would never be enough for me because I want to go home to Israel. I spend a lot of time in Israel every year in the summer, and I work from there. It's not that I take the time off necessarily, but the kind of flexibility that I have in academia, I don't think I could get in any other job. So I didn't even consider any other job here. And whenever I get upset about parts of academic life and work, I remind myself that it is flexible, and I really, really value that flexibility. I value the fact that I could take care of my kid a day and a half a week, even after maternity leave. I value the fact that I made my maternity leave 1 semester, even though it was supposed to be 6 weeks for both kids. I did that. I really like that. And I think in the US, not many jobs afford that. So I just never considered anything else here. So it kind of just happened, but it didn't have to happen this way.
And someone else is also asking, what do you think makes a good academic? What you think are the important aspects to be a good academic?
So my mantra for that is there are many ways to succeed. I don't think there is a single answer to that. I think different people are academics in different ways. So I don't have an answer to that. As a graduate student, I was amazed that as a not a master's student, because I wasn't really paid as a master's student, but as a PhD student, when I was paid, I was really amazed that people will pay me to indulge in my curiosity. So I think, being curious is important, and I know we don't pay graduate students and postdocs all that much, but still I was shocked that someone would pay me to do this, because I was used to working for the salary and then doing the curiosity stuff in weekends and nights and not being paid for it. So yeah, I think kind of keeping that perspective once in a while helps maybe be a happier academic. I don't know that it's a more successful academic necessarily. Yeah, but just many, many ways to be successful.
That's also important to remember. And someone else also asked, people are asking if they can take your class. which I would also like to be honest. And
So yeah, so
also,
I'm teaching for the first time this class called Mentoring Best Practices, and it's been a blast. I'm teaching it with another professor at Princeton, and someone from so Laura Murray. She's our McGraw Teaching and Learning Center, and she's an expert in mentoring more than I am. I mean, I know it in practice. She knows it in theory as well. And it's just been a blast, this course. I've learned so much. I love it. I'm definitely hoping to teach it again. And ideally in the future, in some point, I would want to make it kind of an online class that people can take. I mean, so this was something I talked to Weiji before we started this course, about, this came out of the Global Growing Up in Science sub-series on mentoring. So, one day, hopefully we could do, everybody can participate in this. The syllabus is, I'm happy to make our syllabus available, and the readings are amazing. I mean, I've just learned so much from them. So just looking at the lists of readings there and going through them, I think could be very interesting for people.
and someone else was also asking, what do you think are the best references for establishing group norms? And in case if your syllabus is public also for that.
Yeah, so I'll, I can actually put the syllabus in the chat right now because I have it open. Let me just do that really quickly. It's only recently stopped being work in progress. So what do I do? I'll share. Copy link. So here's the syllabus. Yeah, and it has you'll see that today's class has some reading about establishing group norms. The readings are really useful, are really good there, but they still don't have a how-to. I think part of the idea there is that there is no real how-to, but really recognizing the importance of norms. And I would suggest in that respect to also read work by Betsy Levy-Palak. I'll write her name too. This is what she researches, and she really points out how quickly people learn norms. So you go into a class for the first time, especially like a small class, a seminar, immediately, subconsciously probably, but you look around to see what are everybody else doing. If everybody has their computer open, you'll open your laptop too. If nobody is, you won't. Very quickly we adapt to whatever situation we're in. So one of the ideas in Betsy Levy-Palak's research is that one way she works on conflict, on how to resolve conflicts, genocide in Rwanda and bullying in schools, many types of conflict. And the idea is that rather than trying to change people's behavior by changing their beliefs, you can more easily change their behavior by changing the norms. If they think X is a norm, they will change their behavior. Their beliefs will come after that. And I think about that a lot also in my work on reducing gender bias in academia. Part of what we do in Bias Watch Neuro is we want to portray a different norm. The norm is that women present in conferences, and then things will follow from that. Also in anti-racism work, I think it's a good tip that the norms will be the easiest way to change behavior.
We have a few more questions, not too much time left, but I would really like to ask you all the ones that are in the chat, if it's okay for you. So maybe we go a bit over time, but not too much. So one is asking, I would like to hear your advice on choosing labs based on the topic versus the people environment, and also if a poor lab environment, in your opinion, will eventually wear down one's original passion for the intellectual topic.
Yes, so I think that's a really, really important question. And I think I've had to do this from the start, because with this program where they told us you have to choose a master's, they also told us, because we were like, in no man's land, we were like, it's like someone with no major. They said you could choose by, the area, like the department that you want to be in, like, your major, or you can choose by a researcher that you want to work with, or you can choose by a topic that you want to do your research on, and then, find the place to be in. And I think, so I went through the topic, right? But when I got to both my PhD and my postdoc, I was much more careful. And I loved my lab, my master's lab. I have friends to this day from that lab. But I really, my advice is to be very careful about this choice, and if possible, visit in person, and even for a while. So when I went to do my PhD in London, I got a 9-week visit fellowship first from the EU, and even that was divided into 2. So I went for 4 weeks, and then went back to Israel, and then another 5 weeks. So it was like, it's great hedging on both sides, because I think also on the side of the advisor, it's really hard to hire people and you don't know who you'll work well with. And I think it was great both for me and for Peter Dan. I was in his lab, that we had 4 weeks, and then it was clear that we wanted to do the other 5 weeks. And by the end of those 5 weeks, Peter was like, we'll fund you through the rest of the summer. And then I stayed long, and I kept going back and forth to Israel because I had to take classes and stuff. But basically, we kind of went into it clear-eyed. And then when I was looking for my postdoc, I went to interview in person in all of the places. Sometimes people don't do that, but I went to interview in person. But the other thing was I asked the advisors, who can I talk to in the lab who's been in a similar position? So I was changing from theory to empirical work. I was going to learn fMRI. I had done only theory before that. And so I wanted to know, did you ever have a postdoc who did that, who made that change, and can I talk to them? And I got names, and I emailed those people, and I asked them direct questions. And for instance, when I went to John Cohen's lab, I knew that he's very busy. He runs a whole department, and he has a large lab. So I asked people directly, as a postdoc, how much time did you get? How much attention? Was it good? Was it enough for you? And then I kind of could judge whether that will be good for me or not. So I definitely suggest asking a lot of questions about the exact environment that you'll be in and the mentor that you will have, because there are many places that do research on each specific questions. I think, well, maybe not many, but usually more than one. And I do think that a place where you'll not feel at home will really wear you down. Maybe it's different for other people, but for me, science is not enough to hold me. Like, if I'm in a great environment, I learned that with programming, right? If I'm in a great environment, I can do anything. But if only science is holding me up, science is just full of rejections and long-term goals that you don't know when you'll reach, and nonlinear progress. Like, that's just too hard if that's the only thing that is supporting you.
Makes a lot of sense. And someone else is also asking if there's a special reason or a cause that led you to your current field of research, so specifically what you're doing right now.
Just random interest, I think. I gave a seminar presentation in an undergraduate seminar on reinforcement learning, and decided that is really super interesting, and have stayed there ever since. So I think of that when I teach seminars, how like one paper that a student presents can change their whole career, because that's what happened to me. And now I'm doing computational psychiatry because I heard one talk, again, at a conference, Clash Stefan talking about how, about computational psychiatry and the crisis in psychiatry and why it's all our fault. And he convinced me, and I just left that room saying, okay, I know the next thing I want to do. So for me, it's kind of random. But it is the stuff that I'm interested in. So I think, again, I think some people are way more passionate than me about their science, or it's way more personal for them. My science is not personal for me. It's not like in my daily life. I'm not like okay, I study decision making and I'm not that great at decision making, but I think I've improved over time. But it really is I am doing this stuff that I'm interested in, and I'm not calculating it as a strategy or something like that, because again, it's like, I feel like the only point in doing this is if you're doing what you're really passionate about. And that's also what I ask people when I hire them. I ask them what they're passionate about, because I'm not in the business of changing what they want, of telling them to do something different from what they want to do. I want to hire people who what they want to do is something that is interesting for me to kind of come along on the journey. Because I think they should do whatever they want. There's no point otherwise, especially with, low graduate student and postdoc salaries. Like, unless it's exactly your point of curiosity, then go to a different lab where you can do the exact thing that you want to do.
Thank you so much, Yael. It was amazing. And I would like to close this event with the question that I also had, but someone posted in the chat. It's just a very super quick answer. And is, what do you think now after being in academia? The fact that academics are not people's people is acquired or self-selected? And we will close with this one. Tell us, please. We want to know.
I think it is self-selected, and I think the mentoring course is trying to trying to help a little bit with that for those for whom it doesn't come natural to be people's people. Because I think my personal view now that I'm in academia, so I wrote this in my unofficial biography that originally I did want to be a teacher, and I guided hikes and stuff, and I taught first graders and up to fifth graders science classes in school instead, well, not science, nature classes in school. I love that. And I see now that our job as faculty is really a very, very deeply a teaching job, not just teaching in class, but teaching, mentoring, teaching students and postdocs who come to our labs to learn something new. They don't come to be a scientist in our lab. They come to learn something new and then go be a scientist in their own lab or in their own career in industry, or they will be a scientist later. We train them. And so I think it is really a people's person. Like, some people are really disappointed when they find out that as faculty, they can't just sit at the bench and do research all day. I was really happy. I didn't know because I was clueless, but that was a good surprise for me that now what I get to do is work with people all the time, because that's what I love doing. And so I think there should be more self-selection to that in academia. The problem is that the whole training is not about that. So that's what we're trying to do with the mentoring course.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this beautiful talk, for all your answer, and also for what you're doing to academia, because it's really nice. So
thank you. Thank you everybody for coming. This has been amazing.
Thank you very much from me as well. I found it personally very great to hear lots of things that I recognize from my own view on academia. So it was very special to listen to. The next event is going to be on May 5th, so coming up relatively quickly, and that's going to be Megan Carey from Champalimaud. To register, you can go to the Growing Up in Science website. The link is already there. Hope to see you then. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Take care.
Wait, G, I want to read all the comments, so don't close the meeting yet. Give me a minute or two to
Sure.
read.
Yes.
Thanks everybody.